Hey, it's March 31st, 2020, and the sun is shining. How about that? And today we're working on the planter. Kind of got some stuff rearranged this morning and got the planter hooked onto the tractor. Looking at switching the tractor that I used to pull the planter possibly this year if I can get everything worked out for that. The other tractor doesn't have the same PTO shaft as this one, so it just kind of depends if I can get a hold of a coupler to put on the PTO pump in a timely fashion and get everything else figured out for the markers and stuff like that. But what we're doing today is working on the row units. So when I started farming in 2016, I replaced half the discs. On a red planter like this, there's one disc that leads, so it gives you kind of a sharper edge to cut into stubble and stuff like that. So they really work a little bit better or require less aftermarket stuff to no-till versus like a red or a blue one, or sorry, a green or a blue one. But the front disc or the leading disc tends to wear faster. So when I started farming, I was sort of poor at the time, and or at least adjusting to the amount of capital investment that farming requires. So I just replaced the front discs and left the trailing discs the way that they were. And that worked okay. However, as things have worn, it seems like having the trailing disc smaller is kind of leading to a lot more pressure on the leading disc and kind of taking out bearings. So kind of going through everything, replacing both discs. I also have some new scrapers that we're putting on here. So the original case scrapers are these guys, which is just kind of a little triangle of steel essentially on a bracket, and you kind of use the nut on the other side of this bolt to squeeze together to adjust the tension on that. They work okay for the most part. This one's not a problem, but some of them, like in order as the scraper part wears, you have to squeeze them down, and then you end up getting the bracket into the disc blades, which maybe is a little bit more of an issue on the other half of the planter. These row units, this is a 955, which is sort of one of the later model cyclos that has the air hopper delivery system instead of being metered in the row unit itself. But on the later ones, they changed so that half of the planter has the left disc leading and half the planter has the right disc leading. But the gauge wheel arms that sit on these pivots are the same, so like the discs are kind of in opposite spots in relation to the wheels, and that actually kind of caused a problem for my scraper. So I've got kind of a mismatched set of the new scrapers on this one right now. I originally had bought one of this style to kind of check them out, and then ordered 11 more to be able to switch the whole planter over, and have not had to do that yet. But it's really kind of a slick design. There's kind of a little raised rivet in the center, and then basically it puts pressure on the scraper, but the scraper can pivot to the right and the left. And all the tension is just based on squeezing down those, which I don't know exactly how that's going to work long term, but hopefully it'll be okay. I am looking forward to not having that bolt go through, because that tends to kind of catch when we have to clean or replace the seed sensor, which is down here. You have to kind of snake it up, and having that bolt go across where you tension the squeeze on the scrapers can make that kind of tricky in some spots. But so basically we're pulling off the old discs, putting new ones on. So there's caps that go over here that we've got taken off right now, and then putting it back in, and there's little shim washers that you use to set the spacing to make sure that the discs are not too tight or too loose. And then the other thing that I'm also going to do is replace these pins that the gauge wheels pivot on. This one actually doesn't feel too bad, but some of them are starting to get a pretty significant worn spot, and I kind of suspect that causes or allows the gauge wheel to sort of move more than it should. So I'm going to go ahead and replace those while I have things torn apart. However, I had to order those from the local dealer, and they aren't going to be here for a couple days. So I'm kind of going through and getting the discs put on today, and then we'll just put the gauge wheels sort of back on loose the way that they are, and then we'll replace the pins. And then there's also an adjustment on those gauge wheels to kind of get them up close to the discs or just barely touching the discs, but so that they're not rubbing too hard and wearing out the inside edge of the gauge wheel tires. But this row unit, I haven't taken anything off, so you can kind of see where the gauge wheels are. We just pull out this pin here, and then they'll slide off, and we can get to the stuff back behind. But these are the ones that I just took off the second row unit. So this would be the trailing disc. So we're right at 13.5 on that, which is kind of when you're supposed to replace them. I think they start out as 14. This one has been run for 4 years now, I think, and we've worn about 1/4 of an inch on it. So what I'll do, since the bean planter uses the same stuff for the most part, other than switching some of the row units so that the opposite disc is leading on half the planter, everything else is the same back to the 800 cyclos, which is what the bean planter is based off of. So the discs that are still usable we'll kind of use either for pre-season replacement on the bean planter or as spares. With the bean planter, we're not quite as concerned about perfection as long as we can get the beans under some dirt. So we're a little bit less picky on some of the wear items on it. With the corn planter, we kind of try to be picky about the stuff that matters, I guess, is what it comes down to. And probably I'm picky about different stuff than Dad was in some spots, and there's some things that he was picky about that I'm not, I would guess. But got a few other things to work on the planter, but not anything too crazy, I don't think. So mostly just kind of replacing some discs. I know I need to do some discs as well as seed boots and firming points on the other planter, which is sort of these pieces. So on a red planter like this, you have this piece that sort of creates your V in the bottom of the seed slot, and then the boot is this piece here. And eventually, like over time, they'll kind of wear on the bottom edges and get either thin or sharp, or like eventually start kind of cutting up and give loose dirt the opportunity to fall back in. So at least the rear 8 rows on the bean planter, I'm going to totally put new discs and boots and points on. The front rows, I think, I've had some stuff replaced on them more recently, so probably I'll just kind of go through them and replace the bits that need attention, but won't do wholesale replacement on the 7 splitter rows. But that's basically what we're working on today, I guess. I think we have some seed coming tomorrow, hopefully. So we'll get that unloaded and in the shed and kind of ready to go. And hoping that we can work down some tile ditches. They have settled a decent amount over the winter, but there were some spots where we ran new mains along the edge of waterways, which is kind of an erosion, or a spot with a lot of potential for erosion. So I want to kind of get those worked down so that we can get things smoothed out, but also wanted to let them settle as long as possible so that we don't end up with the tile ditch having a channel down the side of the waterway that's going to create problems as it rains. So hoping that we can get some of that done. It's supposed to rain here at the end of the week. I don't know if it's going to amount to very much, but want to kind of get some spot tillage done, hopefully, but would like it to be as dry as possible, and need to get some dry fertilizer lined up and a few other things, I guess, random errands. Hoping that we'll see what the weather forecast does, I guess. Potentially we might be planting in a couple weeks if things go well and the forecast looks good at that point in time, but we could have a month too if it turns off cold and rainy at some point here. Well, it's about 7:30 and got stuff put away. Try that again with lighting. It's about 7:30, got stuff put away. Got the 6 of the row units done on the planter, so I got 3 on each wing, so that's the 6 in the middle that are left. It's supposed to rain later this week, so I kind of did the wings first with the thought that if it's too wet or windy or cold or damp or whatever to do it out on the slab here. By doing the wings ahead of time, I can leave the planter folded up and do the other 6 with it just sitting in the shed. Or if it's nice, I can pull it out and do them out in front of the shop again for the rest of them. But got hopefully seed coming tomorrow and a few other things to do. Might do a little machinery terrace and kind of see what the forecast is looking like as we get closer to the first major chance of rain. Exactly what I end up doing when, but plenty of things to do, so I don't think keeping busy is going to be a problem. Okay, I think we're recording. It's April 1st afternoon, Wednesday, and pretty nice out today. I've got the 4-wheeler and going around and checking terrace intakes. So this is one that had gotten knocked out, but didn't seem to have anything actually wrong. So I don't know how that happened exactly, but got several of those to check here today. Also got the disc hooked up on the New Holland tractor. So gonna disc down some tile lines and some terraces that we had built a year ago. This is one of the fields that we planted dry cover crop in, so it's been starting to green up here the last few weeks especially. We don't have a lot of growth above ground yet, but probably this will be growing another couple weeks at least, maybe more than that, depending on exactly how the weather and planting schedules and everything turns out. Usually we'll either kill it right ahead of planting, or I don't know that I've ever tried any sprayed after planting, but I'm not necessarily scared of that as long as weather looks like we'd be able to get in. So we might try some crazy stuff this year, depending on how things play out here. But even though we seeded it fairly late, since harvest was late last year, we did get a pretty decent stand. This was the first year that I did a 15-inch row spacing on the cover crop rye. So that's another sort of experiment, I guess, to see how that works, or if that still gives us suppression on mare's tail and stuff like that. I haven't really seen anything growing here, but this field doesn't have very much mare's tail pressure in this particular spot. But typically kind of what I've found is that usually the winter annuals don't necessarily grow a lot unless the rye can grow. So if the rye isn't very big, the winter annuals hopefully haven't had much of a chance to get established either. Well, we had some excitement. Dad was using the disc and blew out an O-ring on the bottom of the wing folding cylinder, which would normally be right in there. So we've got it taken apart, and this is the O-ring that came out of it. If you can see the rubber shards there. I'm pretty sure we actually had this apart probably 3 or 4 years ago, and clearly the O-ring didn't hold, so I don't know if we had the right thing. I think I'm gonna try to get the same O-ring, or maybe like a stiffer O-ring, and it seems like it's an 1/8 inch thick, but we have a wider groove here than that. And I think maybe there should be a backup ring with it. Whether or not I can find one locally remains to be seen, but basically gonna go try to make a parts run and see what I can come up with to get this put back together and get a little bit of disking done this afternoon yet. Hello from the tractor. It's Wednesday afternoon now, April 1st still. Got the cylinder put back together on the disc, and we're working down some of the new terraces. Mostly just trying to get things smoothed up. Normally really like to be no-till, so probably not making the no-till gods very happy today. But kind of what we found is that when we put in new terraces or do major dirt work like this, we really have to do at least some tillage, or it just stays really rough and like undulating, I guess, for a really long time. So got a little bit more of this. I think it's probably going to take another pass either with the disc or might use the field cultivator, depending on kind of how things look. But if it doesn't rain tonight, I think it's going to be cloudy tomorrow, so probably the top's not going to dry off very well, but we'll see how things go. Might be able to do some more tomorrow, hit it a second time, and be pretty much ready to plant whenever the weather gets good. But that may be optimistic, I would say. Wishful thinking, but kind of trying to get at least some things moving in the right direction. I don't think, if it does rain, it's not supposed to amount to very much, so hopefully be able to do some more spot tillage and stuff next week if we need to. I think the last I knew, the short-term forecast was fairly dry, but there was maybe some above average precipitation in the extended, so we'll see what happens, go from there. It's about 7:15 in the evening now. I got done everything that I wanted to disc today. The hydraulic cylinder held so far. I sort of mentioned earlier that I got that put back together and didn't really say too much about it, but was not able to get a backing ring from anywhere local, so I ended up taking one that I had that was quite a bit too big and cut it in half, or cut a chunk out of it and glued it back together and put that on there. I'm not real convinced that the O-ring that I got is actually the right one, so maybe gonna check with some hydraulic shops or try to find somebody that actually knows what should be in there and try to get the right stuff so that when it fails the next time, because I have a feeling that it probably won't make it more than 2 or 3 years like the last one. Hopefully we'll have the right stuff to fix it correctly. Still got stuff to put away yet, and need to change oil in this, or want to at least, and now is about as good of opportunity as any. So I'm going to pull it up and get the oil draining out, and then I've got some stuff to get put back in the shed. But hopefully I'll get finished before it gets dark, and we'll see what happens if it rains tonight or what the forecast ends up being tomorrow, what exactly transpires. If it stays dry, I might do some more spot tillage if things dry out on top. I got everything hit once, but some of the tile lines, especially some of the ones along the waterways where we put in new mains or sub-mains, didn't work down great, but they were still wet enough in those areas where the dirt was mounded up that they really need to dry for a while before it's worth hitting them again. So we'll see what happens with that, I guess. I think even if it doesn't rain, it's not supposed to be sunny tomorrow, so that probably kind of limits the prospects for doing too much field work, but we'll see what happens, I guess. Forecasters can be wrong.